The prairie wind carried whispers across the Kansas plains. Lonely whispers, widowed whispers. Eliza Carrington sat at her wooden desk, a desk that had belonged to her husband before the fever took him. The lamplight flickered, throwing long shadows on the walls of her quiet home. Too quiet, a silence that pressed against her chest each night like a weight she could no longer bear. She had tried to fill the emptiness. She had worked the land. She had tended the animals. She had smiled politely at neighbors when they offered help. But when the nights grew long and the wind howled across the open prairie, Eliza felt the truth. She was alone, terribly, achingly alone. Her hand trembled as she lifted her pen. A single sheet of paper lay before her. She had stared at it for weeks, prayed over it, argued with herself. But tonight, something inside her broke open, something stronger than pride, something louder than grief. Her heart whispered, "You cannot go on like this." So she wrote, wanted a husband, strong in spirit, even if not in wealth. Honest hands, steady heart. A partner for life on the Kansas frontier. The words looked strange on the page, as though they belonged to another woman. A desperate woman. Eliza blinked back tears. She dipped the pen again. Her voice, silent but steady in her heart, added one final plea. "I do not ask for love, only companionship and kindness." Her breath shuddered. Ink smudged where a tear had fallen. Eliza folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. The paper was thin, fragile, much like her courage. She prayed, not for a fairy tale, not for a miracle, only for a man who would not leave her more broken than she already was. And with trembling fingers, she sealed the envelope. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The letter had traveled farther than her courage could ever carry her. And when she began to think no answer would come, a knock sounded at her door. A boy from town, dust on his boots, a telegram in his hand. She broke the seal with shaking fingers. Her eyes widened as she read. Response received. Man headed your way. Prepare. Eliza pressed the telegram to her lips. Her heart raced. This was real. The morning the train was due, Eliza dressed carefully. Her black widow's gown had been worn for far too long, so she set aside. Instead, she chose a simple blue dress, faded but neat, a ribbon tied at her throat. She pinned her hair carefully, smoothing back the stubborn curls. Her reflection in the small, looking glass startled her. Not a girl, not anymore, but not yet old. A woman still waiting, still hoping. The depot bustled with life when she arrived. Children darted between wagons, their laughter piercing through the hissing of the train's iron belly. Merchants shouted. A woman clutched a basket of chickens that clucked angrily in protest. Eliza stood apart from the crowd. Her gloved hands clutched her parasol too tightly. Her throat ached with nerves. Each time a man stepped off the train, she held her breath. One was a soldier, polished boots gleaming. Another was a merchant, his coat trimmed with gold buttons. Still another, a rancher, broad-shouldered, laughing easily with the men who greeted him. But none of them looked her way. None of them carried her letter in their breast pocket. Then, the laughter shifted. Children giggled. A few women turned their heads, whispering behind their hands. A man stepped off the last car. He was tall but thin. His boots were worn, cracked from years of dust and mud. His coat hung loose on his frame, patched at the elbows. His hat was battered, his shirt faded. And in his eyes was something Eliza recognized. A quiet sorrow, a weary gentleness. The look of a man who had been beaten down, but not broken. The depot crowd mocked him with snickers and whispers. But still he walked forward, step by step, slow, steady, until he stood before her. He removed his hat, holding it respectfully against his chest. His hands were rough, calloused. His voice was low, humble. "My name's Thomas Hale, ma'am. I reckon you're the widow who sent for me." The world seemed to still around her. The train hissed in the background, steam curling into the autumn air. Children laughed, merchants shouted, wagons creaked. But all Eliza could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. This was him, the man her letter had summoned. Not dressed in finery, not boasting of wealth or charm. A man in rags. And yet, His eyes held something she had not seen in a very long time. A kind of quiet strength. A promise unspoken. Her fingers trembled at her side. Should she take him home? Or send him away? Eliza Carrington had opened her heart to a stranger. Now, face to face with him, she realized this choice would shape the rest of her life. The train wailed in the distance. A sound like a warning. A sound like fate. And the chapter closed. On the widow's first look into the eyes of the man who might become her husband. Eliza must decide whether to accept this man or send him away. Eliza Carrington stood on the platform, her parasol trembling in her grip. The ragged man before her, Thomas Hale, had spoken her name as though he already carried it in his heart. The crowd around them whispered, some with pity, others with cruel laughter. That can't be him. She sent for a husband and got a beggar. The words stung. Eliza straightened her spine, forcing herself not to flinch. Thomas didn't seem to hear them. Or perhaps he had heard such words so often that they no longer pierced. He only lowered his gaze, respectful, his hat clutched in calloused hands. A long pause stretched between them. Eliza's heart pounded. She could send him away. It would be so easy. A single shake of her head. A single word, no. And yet, something in his eyes caught her. Not desperation, not begging, but a quiet endurance. The kind of strength born not from riches, but from suffering carried with dignity. Eliza lifted her chin. You are Thomas Hale? Yes, ma'am. His voice was steady, soft-spoken, a man unused to being heard. I ain't got much. Truth be told, I ain't got near nothing. But I've got 2 hands that know hard work, and a promise to give you all I can. The words lingered. Simple, honest. Her breath hitched. The memory of her late husband brushed against her heart like a ghost. He had spoken the same way all those years ago when he first laid the foundation of the home they had built together. Eliza swallowed hard. Come, she said quietly. You'll ride with me. The wagon waited outside the depot. The horse stamped its hooves, restless. Thomas set his battered trunk in the back. A trunk that seemed far too light for a man's whole life. As he climbed onto the bench beside her, Eliza caught the faint scent of leather, smoke, and dust clinging to him. Not unpleasant, only raw like the land itself. They rode in silence for a long time. The prairie stretched wide around them, golden fields swaying under the September sun. At last, Eliza spoke. You came far. Thomas nodded. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Texas. Worked cattle for years. Worked rail for a time. Then worked where folk would have me. And now. He turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers with quiet gravity. Now I reckon I'm here. If you'll have me. Eliza's grip tightened on the reins. Her heart warred with itself. Could she trust him? Could she welcome this ragged stranger into the home she had once shared with the man she loved? Her doubts whispered, he's poor. He's nothing. He'll be a burden. But another voice stirred, the one that had written the letter. He's humble. He's willing. He's here. When the wagon creaked into her yard, Thomas climbed down first. Before Eliza could move, he reached up and offered his hand. It startled her, the gentleness in the gesture. Her breath caught as her gloved hand rested in his. His palm was rough, scarred from years of labor. Yet he held her as though she were made of porcelain. She stepped down carefully. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and she saw something unspoken there. Not pity, not desire, but respect. The house loomed before them. Weathered wood, the porch sagging slightly. It was not grand, but it was home. Thomas stood still, his hat against his chest. His gaze swept over the house, the barn, the tilled field beyond. Finally, he spoke in a low, reverent voice. It's fine land, worth tending. Eliza blinked. Most men would have looked for flaws, for what was lacking. Thomas saw worth. She led him inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and bread baked earlier that morning. The furniture was simple, hand-carved. Every piece carried a memory of her late husband's hands. Thomas removed his hat and paused at the threshold. His eyes flicked to a small portrait on the mantel, Eliza's husband, smiling faintly in the captured moment. He did not ask. He did not intrude. He only bowed his head slightly, as though paying silent respect to the man who came before him. The silence thickened. Eliza's pulse quickened. She gestured stiffly toward the small spare room. "You may rest there. Supper will be in an hour." Thomas nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." As he stepped into the room, Eliza leaned against the wall, pressing her hand to her chest. Her breath trembled. She had expected disappointment, shame, regret, but what she felt instead was confusion and a dangerous stirring of something she had promised never to feel again. Hope. That evening, the two of them sat across from one another at the wooden table. The lamplight painted their shadows on the walls. Eliza served stew, her hand steady though her heart was not. Thomas bowed his head before he ate, whispering a prayer. The sound startled her. Few men prayed so earnestly. When he lifted his gaze again, his eyes lingered on her, not with hunger, but with quiet gratitude. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'll work hard here. Whatever you ask, I'll see to it. Just give me the chance." Eliza's spoon froze halfway to her lips. For a moment, she saw not the ragged man before her, but the possibility of a partner. Her voice faltered. "We'll see, Mr. Hale. We'll see." The night deepened. The wind rattled the shutters. And as Eliza lay awake in her bed, staring into the darkness, her mind would not rest. She could still feel the warmth of his rough hand when he had helped her down from the wagon. She could still hear the humble promise in his voice. And though she tried to push it away, her heart whispered again, "Perhaps this man is more than he seems." But in the quiet of the night, Thomas, too, sat awake, his trunk at his feet, a letter folded deep inside, a letter written in another woman's hand, a secret Eliza did not yet know. And when the wind howled through the cracks of the little house, Thomas whispered into the darkness, "Don't let me fail her. Thomas carries a secret, and Eliza must decide whether to let him into her heart or keep him at arm's length." The rooster crowed before the sun touched the horizon. Eliza Carrington stirred in her bed, the quilt pulled to her chin. The house was still, but faintly, through the wooden walls, she heard it. The sound of boots, the creak of the barn door, the steady rhythm of work. Thomas Hale had risen before her. By the time Eliza stepped onto the porch, the sky was painted gold. And there he was. His coat was off, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. Muscles, wiry but strong, flexed with every movement as he lifted a broken fence post from the ground. The post had leaned for months, one of many things Eliza had meant to fix, but grief and weariness had kept her from it. Thomas worked without complaint. Sweat glistened on his brow, though the morning was cool. He carried himself like a man who had lived his whole life in labor. When he noticed her watching, he tipped his hat, though his hands were caked in dirt. "Morning, ma'am. Hope you don't mind." Fence was calling for it. Eliza's lips parted, but words faltered. She wasn't used to this. A man taking initiative. A man who worked not for pay, not for praise, but because it needed doing. She cleared her throat. "You needn't trouble yourself. There's more work here than one man can finish." Thomas only gave a small smile. "Then I reckon I'll just keep at it till the good Lord calls me done." His answer disarmed her. Simple, steady, without boast. By midday, Thomas had repaired 2 sections of fence, hauled water from the well, and split enough wood to last a week. Eliza found herself watching from the window more than once. Each time, she scolded herself. "He's not your husband. Not truly. You sent for help, not for something more." But her heart refused to listen. Her heart watched the way he moved, the way he carried burdens without complaint, the way he paused to stroke the horse's muzzle, whispering gentle words, though no one was there to see. This was not the man she had expected. This was not the beggar the town had mocked at the depot. This was something else. That evening, supper was quiet. Eliza ladled stew into his bowl, trying not to meet his gaze. But Thomas broke the silence. "Good land you got here. Soil's rich. Needs work, but it'll give back." Eliza tilted her head. "You speak like a farmer." His eyes shadowed. For a moment, he seemed far away. "No, ma'am. Never had land of my own. Always worked another man's. Never stayed long enough to plant something and see it grow." A pause. His hand tightened on the spoon. Eliza's heart ached at the quiet sorrow in his voice. She wanted to ask more, but she held back. Instead, she said softly, "Then perhaps it's time you did." Later that night, Eliza carried a lamp to the porch. The air was cool, the stars spilling endless across the sky. She found Thomas sitting on the steps, sharpening a blade with slow, deliberate strokes. For a long moment, she watched him. The lamplight flickered across his face, strong jaw, weary eyes, a man carved by hardship. He looked up. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Eliza's heart beat too quickly. Something about the sight of him there, steady, grounded, made her chest tighten with emotions she dared not name. Finally, she broke the silence. "Thomas, why did you answer my letter?" His hand stilled on the blade. He drew a slow breath, as though weighing each word before releasing it. "I reckon, because it sounded honest. And I ain't had much honesty in my life." His gaze lifted, holding hers in the lamplight. "You didn't ask for riches. Didn't ask for a hero. Just a man with steady hands and a steady heart. That I could try to be." Eliza's throat tightened. Her hands trembled where they clutched the lamp. No man had spoken to her so plainly since her husband. No man had looked at her with such quiet sincerity. She turned away quickly, afraid he might see the tears glistening in her eyes. The night deepened. Thomas retired to the spare room. Eliza lay awake in her bed. Sleep would not come. Her heart warred with her mind. He was poor. He carried nothing but rags and a battered trunk. But he worked with diligence. He spoke with humility. And for the first time in years, she felt something stir. Not just safety, not just gratitude, but something dangerous. Something she had sworn she would never allow herself again. Hope and longing. In the darkness of his room, Thomas sat at the edge of his bed. He pulled the battered trunk closer. From within, he took a folded letter, worn at the creases, stained with sweat. He opened it carefully, the words still legible despite the years. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. Thomas's lips pressed into a line as he read silently. His hands trembled. Then, softly, he whispered, "I'll keep my promise. Somehow, I'll keep it." The prairie wind rattled the shutters. Eliza stirred in the next room, her heart whispering questions she dared not speak. And Thomas kept his secret close, for though the widow was beginning to see his worth, she did not yet know the weight he carried. Thomas's secret past remains hidden, even as Eliza begins to feel her heart awaken. The days that followed unfolded like the turning of a quiet hymn. Thomas Hale worked the land as though it were his own flesh and blood. At dawn, he was already in the fields. By dusk, his hands were raw, his shirt clung to his back, and yet he never complained. The fences mended, the barn roof patched, the well dug deeper for cleaner water. Tasks Eliza had carried like stones upon her shoulders began to lighten. And each time she looked out the window, she saw him, steady, tireless. One evening, as she stood by the stove, stirring a pot of stew, Eliza caught herself humming, a sound she hadn't made in years. She froze, the spoon trembling in her hand. Had grief begun to loosen its grip? Or was it this man, this stranger, who had brought a piece of warmth back into her home? Her cheeks flushed as she heard his boots on the porch. She quickly busied herself, but her heart betrayed her with its quickened beat. At supper, the silence between them was not empty. It was filled with unspoken things, with glances that lingered too long, with a rhythm of two souls learning the shape of each other's presence. Thomas ate with quiet gratitude, pausing to bow his head before every meal. Eliza found herself studying the curve of his jaw, the way his lashes lowered when he prayed. And she scolded herself silently. He is here for work, for survival. Do not mistake kindness for something else. Yet when he lifted his gaze to hers and smiled, soft and genuine, she felt her resolve weaken. But the world beyond her homestead was not blind. Whispers traveled faster than prairie fire. The widow with her ragged husband, the man in patched clothes living beneath her roof. Some laughed, some sneered, some pitied her. And one afternoon, as Eliza walked into town for flour and sugar, the whispers followed her like shadows. At the mercantile, Mrs. Dobbins leaned across the counter, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "So, Eliza Carrington, is it true? That poor drifter you brought home from the depot. He's your husband now?" Eliza stiffened. Her fingers tightened around the bag of flour. "He is a man who works hard," she said evenly. "That is enough." Mrs. Dobbins chuckled. "Hard work won't keep the wolves away, nor fill an empty table come winter." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful, dear. Men who arrive with nothing often leave the same way." Eliza's heart ached with anger and shame. She left the store quickly, her cheeks burning. When she returned home, Thomas was repairing the barn door. He looked up at her, smiling faintly. But Eliza could not smile back. The whispers clung to her. They poisoned the air. She wondered, had she been a fool? Had she mistaken desperation for honesty? That evening, she avoided his gaze. She spoke little at supper. Thomas noticed. His brow furrowed as he set down his spoon. "Ma'am, did I wrong you somehow?" Eliza froze. Her heart raced. "No," she said quickly. "Not you. Not yet." Her words slipped sharper than she intended. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Later that night, unable to bear the silence, Eliza stepped outside. The prairie stretched endless under a sky of stars. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, her thoughts a storm. The whispers, the doubts, the memory of her husband, all colliding until her chest ached. Then she heard it. The sound of Thomas's voice, low, quiet. She turned. Through the cracked door of the barn, she saw him kneeling, his hands folded, his head bowed, praying, "Lord, don't let me fail her. She's carried more than any woman should. Give me strength to be what she needs, even if she don't believe I can be. And if I ain't the man, then let me at least leave her better than I found her." Eliza's breath caught. Her eyes stung with tears. She fought to blink away. This man, this stranger the town mocked, this ragged husband she had doubted. He was praying not for himself, but for her. Her hand trembled on the shawl. Her lips parted, but she did not step forward. Not yet. She turned back toward the house, her heart pounding. The warmth of his prayer had pierced her walls, and that terrified her more than the whispers of the town ever could. That night, as she lay in bed, the tears finally came. Not of grief, not of regret, but of confusion and longing. She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering into the darkness, "God help me. I think I'm beginning to see him." Meanwhile, in the barn, Thomas unfolded the letter hidden in his trunk once more. His fingers brushed the delicate script, his eyes shadowed with sorrow. He whispered into the night, words no one else could hear. "I'll keep your memories safe, but I can't tell her yet." The wind rattled the windows. The house creaked with secrets, and between them, the widow and the ragged husband, the fragile threads of something dangerous were being spun, something that might grow into love, or unravel in a heartbreak. Eliza begins to feel the pull of love, even as Thomas's hidden past looms between them. The weeks drifted by. Work was steady. The land began to yield. And with every passing day, Thomas Hale proved his worth. The barn stood stronger. The crops showed promise. The animals were tended with care. And in the quiet spaces of the day, when Eliza thought no one was watching, she found herself smiling. Smiling at the way Thomas spoke gently to the horse as though it were a friend. Smiling at the way he removed his hat each time he addressed her, as though she were a lady of fine standing and not a weary widow. Smiling at the way he bowed his head at supper, whispering prayers for blessings he had never known. But most of all, she smiled at the way her house no longer felt so hollow. At night, the silence was filled with the sound of his boots in the hallway, the creak of floorboards as he moved about, the steady, reassuring presence of a man who belonged, not by wealth or title, but by devotion. For the first time in years, Eliza Carrington felt less like a widow and more like a woman learning to live again. One crisp morning, she stepped onto the porch with a steaming cup of coffee. Thomas was already in the field, his shirt damp with sweat as he worked the plow. The sight rooted her in place. The sun caught his figure, outlining him in gold. His movements were strong, sure, not the ragged man she had first seen at the depot, but but a man who carried dignity even in rags. A man shaping the land. And somehow, her heart. He paused, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. When he saw her watching, his lips curved into the faintest smile. It stole her breath, the kind of smile that spoke without words, that asked a question neither dared to voice aloud. Her cheeks warmed. She turned quickly, pretending to fuss with the coffee. But her heart betrayed her. It raced. That evening, after supper, she lingered at the table. Her fingers toyed with the hem of her apron. "Thomas," she began softly, I want to thank you." He looked up, brow furrowing. "For what, ma'am?" For giving life back to this place. To me." Her voice trembled. She met his eyes, searching for judgment, for arrogance. But there was none. Only warmth. Only humility. He reached across the table, his hand rough and scarred. Slowly, carefully, he laid it over hers. Eliza's breath caught. Her heart thudded against her ribs. For a moment, neither moved. The world stilled, until she whispered, barely audible, "Don't call me ma'am. Not here. Not when it's just us." His voice was low. "What should I call you then?" Her lips parted. Her throat ached. "Eliza." The sound of her name on his lips was soft. Reverent. Eliza. Her eyes glistened. Something inside her, something she thought had died with her first husband, stirred back to life. It was dangerous. It was tender. And it was real. But just as the moment thickened with possibility, the sound of hooves thundered in the distance. Eliza stiffened. Thomas's hand pulled back. A rider galloped into the yard, dust rising from the ground. The horse snorted, its reins pulled tight by the man astride it. He swung down with a confidence that filled the air like storm clouds. His coat was fine, his boots polished, his smile sharp. Well, the stranger drawled. "So this is where you've been hiding, Hale?" Thomas's face went pale. His jaw clenched, his shoulders tensed. Eliza looked between them, confusion burning in her chest. You know this man?" Thomas didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. The stranger tipped his hat toward Eliza, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Begging your pardon, ma'am. Name's Silas McGraw. And if you think this man's been honest with you, then I reckon you've been sorely deceived." Eliza's heart lurched. Her gaze snapped to Thomas, but he would not meet her eyes. Silas's smile widened. "Tell her, Hale. Tell the widow what you left behind." The night thickened with dread. The fragile bond Eliza had begun to trust trembled on the edge of breaking. And for the first time since he arrived, Thomas Hale looked less like a savior and more like a man with chains still clinging to his soul. A stranger from Thomas's past arrives, threatening to shatter the trust he and Eliza had begun to build. The night air was heavy. The lantern on the porch flickered, throwing long shadows across the yard. Eliza stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Thomas, her Thomas, would not meet her eyes. And the stranger, Silas McGraw, smiled like a snake that had slithered straight into their lives. "Eliza," Thomas began, his voice rough, strained, "go inside." But she did not move. Her feet were rooted. Her voice, trembling, whispered, "No, not until you tell me the truth." Silas let out a low chuckle, leaning against the hitching post. "Well now, ain't that something? A woman who wants honesty. Don't worry, ma'am. I'll be happy to oblige." Thomas's eyes snapped to him, sharp as steel. "Enough, Silas." But Silas only spread his hands in mock innocence. "Why don't you let her decide? She deserves to know the kind of man she's taken into her home, into her life." The words struck like blows. Eliza's throat tightened. Her pulse raced. "Tell me, Thomas," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Who is he? Why is he here?" Thomas turned to her then, eyes shadowed with something deeper than shame. "Eliza, there are things I never told you. Things I tried to bury when I came west." Her lips parted, desperate for answers. "Then tell me now." But before he could speak, Silas cut in. "Oh, I'll save him the trouble. This man you've been calling husband? He's no stranger to me. He used to ride with my crew, a drifter, a hired hand for jobs most men wouldn't dirty themselves with." He stepped closer, his boots grinding the dirt. "And if you think he came here out of pure intentions, well, ma'am, I reckon you don't know him at all. Eliza's world tilted. She looked at Thomas, searching his face for denial, for a fight, for something. But his silence was damning. "Is it true?" she breathed. Were you one of them?" Thomas's jaw tightened. Finally, he lifted his head. His voice was low, raw. "Yes." The word cut like a blade. Eliza staggered back a step, her hand clutching the railing for balance. Silas grinned, enjoying every fracture in her heart. But he left, didn't he? Walked away from a life he wasn't man enough to finish. Left debts unpaid. Left me to clean up his mess. And I don't forget debts, Hale. Not now, not ever. Thomas stepped forward, fists clenched. I left because I wanted better. Because I wouldn't keep living by blood and theft. He turned to Eliza then, his eyes pleading. "I swear to you, I came here to build, not destroy. To start over. To be the man I should have been all along." The air between them crackled. Eliza's chest heaved with warring emotions. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to run. She saw the man who had fixed her roof, who prayed at her table, who touched her hand with reverence. But she also saw the man who had carried secrets, who had let another tell a story first. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Her voice was softer now, but laced with hurt. "You looked me in the eyes. You broke bread at my table. And all the while, you let me trust a stranger." Thomas's hand lifted, as though he would reach for her. But he let it fall. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd send me away. Afraid I'd lose the only good thing I've found in years." His words lingered, heavy, raw. And for the first time, Eliza saw not just strength in him, but vulnerability. Silas pushed off the hitching post, his tone sharp again. "Well, this has been mighty touchin', but I didn't ride all this way for confessions. I came for what's owed. And if Hale don't pay it, ma'am, you'll be the one to suffer the loss." Eliza's breath hitched. What do you mean?" Silas's smile darkened. "Men like me don't leave empty-handed." Thomas stepped between them, his body a wall. "You'll leave with nothing, Silas. Not now, not ever." But Silas only smirked, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "We'll see about that." The night seemed to hold its breath. Eliza clutched her shawl tighter, her mind spinning. Was she standing beside a man who could protect her? Or was she standing beside the very storm she should have feared all along? Her heart whispered one answer. Her doubt screamed another. And as the lantern sputtered and the stranger's shadow loomed long across the yard, Eliza realized that the choice she made in the next days could mean salvation or ruin. Silas threatens to take what Thomas owes, putting Eliza directly in danger. Her faith in Thomas hangs by a thread. The night after Silas's threat was restless. Eliza tossed in her bed, her mind caught between memory and fear. Every moment replayed, Thomas's hand steady on hers. Thomas's silence when the truth came out. Silas's smirk, his hand resting on his gun as though life and death were a game he alone controlled. Her heart was torn in two. One half whispered to let Thomas go. The other ached to believe in him. Before dawn, the rooster crowed. Eliza rose, wrapped her shawl tight, and stepped into the cool air. She found Thomas already awake. He sat by the barn, sharpening a knife. The whetstones sang with each slow stroke. He looked up when he heard her steps. His eyes were weary, shadowed. "Eliza," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be out here." Her voice shook, though she fought for steadiness. "Thomas, is he coming back?" His silence was answer enough. "Yes." She stepped closer, her anger and hurt rising with the dawn. "You should have told me everything from the start. You robbed me of the choice to trust you with eyes open." He flinched, as though her words cut deeper than any blade. "I know, and I'd give anything to take it back." His gaze hardened then, steel returning to his voice. "But I swear this, Eliza, I will not let him take from you. Not your home, not your life, not you." The conviction in his tone sent a tremor through her. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to lean on him. But her wounds were fresh, and love, once broken, was not so easily mended. Still, something in her heart whispered that she could not turn away now. By mid-morning, the sound of hooves split the air again. Silas McGraw had returned. But this time, he did not come alone. Two men rode with him, rough and weathered. guns on their hips, eyes sharp with menace. Eliza froze on the porch. Her fingers clutched the railing until her knuckles turned white. Thomas stepped out from the barn, shoulders squared, knife at his belt, every inch the man ready for a reckoning. "Well now," Silas drawled as he swung down from his horse. "Looks like we got ourselves a proper welcome." He gestured lazily toward the house. "I told you, Hale. You owe me. You walk away from a man's crew, you don't walk away from his debt. That debt follows. And if I can't have the coin—" His eyes slid toward Eliza, lingering in a way that turned her stomach. "I'll take the land, or something worth even more." Thomas's voice roared like thunder. "You lay one hand on her, Silas, and it'll be the last hand you ever use." The men at Silas's side shifted, ready for a fight. Tension thickened, pressing down like a storm ready to break. Eliza's breath came fast. Her knees weakened, but she did not run inside. She stayed, because she knew this was not just Thomas's fight. It was hers. Silas laughed, cruel and low. "Well now, looks like the widow's worth dying for." He spat in the dirt. "Question is, Hale, is she worth losing for?" Thomas took a step forward, and then another. His voice was steady, controlled, but his eyes burned. "I ain't the man I was when I rode with you. I'm done running, done stealing, done hunting. This land is mine now. This woman is mine to protect, and I'll stand against the devil himself before I let you take either from me." Eliza's heart stilled. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Her breath trembled, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, something that pulled at her soul. Because in that moment, she did not see a man in rags. She saw a husband. She saw a protector. She saw the man she had been waiting for. Silas sneered, his hand hovering over his gun. "Then I reckon it's time we settle this the old way." The air went deadly still. Every bird seemed to hush. The wind itself held back, waiting. Eliza's heart slammed against her ribs. Thomas's hand moved toward his belt. Silas's fingers twitched at his holster. The other men shifted, ready to draw. And then Eliza stepped forward. Her voice rang out, clear, defiant. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." The words shocked even Thomas. He turned to her, his eyes wide, his voice rough. "Eliza." But she stood tall, her shawl slipping from her shoulders, her chin raised against the danger. For the first time in years, she felt not like a widow, but like a warrior's wife. Silas's eyes narrowed, amusement fading into irritation. "Well, ain't that sweet," he muttered. Then, louder to his men, "Looks like we'll just have to take both." And in that instant, hands flew to holsters. The world exploded into motion. Eliza gasped. Thomas lunged. Silas drew. The first gunshot cracked like lightning across the sky. Eliza's scream caught in her throat. Smoke curled in the air. Someone had fallen, but in the chaos she could not see who. A gunfight has erupted. A shot has been fired. Someone has fallen, but is it Thomas, Silas, or one of his men? The gunshot echoed through the valley. Sharp, final. The birds scattered from the trees. Smoke hung in the air, and in the silence that followed, Eliza's breath stopped. Her eyes darted wildly, searching. Thomas, Silas, the men. Someone had fallen. Her heart lurched when she saw him. One of Silas's men, clutching his side, crumpled in the dirt. Silas snarled, his gun raised again. But Thomas was faster. His body moved like a shield, placing himself between Eliza and the threat. His voice thundered across the yard. "This ends here." The fight was swift, brutal. Steel clashed with fire. Dust rose around them, blinding, choking. Thomas wrestled one of the men to the ground, fists flying. The other lunged toward Eliza, pistol flashing. Her scream tore the air. And then Thomas was there again, dragging the man down, his own blade flashing in defense. Blood stained the dirt. Another man went down, groaning, defeated. At last, only Silas remained. His chest heaved, his eyes wild, a cornered wolf baring teeth. He leveled his gun at Thomas. "You should have stayed in the shadows, Hale. You ain't built for the light." Thomas stood tall, chest rising, voice steady. "I may have lived in the dark once, but I won't go back. Not now." Not with her beside me. The words struck like lightning. Eliza's heart pounded in her throat. Her eyes filled with tears she could not hold back. Because in that moment, she knew this man, this flawed, broken man, was the one her soul had been waiting for. The standoff stretched long. Silas's hand trembled on the trigger. Thomas's gaze never wavered. Then the decision came. A blur of movement. Another shot cracked. Silas staggered back. His eyes went wide with disbelief. Then he crumpled to the dirt, the gun falling from his hand. The yard went silent. The storm had passed. Eliza's knees gave way. She sank to the ground, trembling. Thomas rushed to her, his hands gentle despite the blood that smeared them. Eliza, his voice broke. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? She shook her head, tears spilling freely. No, I'm all right. Her hands rose, cupping his face, forcing him to look at her. But you nearly gave your life. For me. His eyes, weary but burning with truth, met hers. I'd give it 1,000 times over. Because you're worth it. More than the land. More than redemption. You're everything. Her lips trembled. The world around them, the dust, the blood, the ruin, faded into nothing. There was only him. Only the man who had arrived in rags, carrying shame and scars. The man who had chosen to fight for her for them. She whispered, voice breaking with love. Then stay. Stay with me. Not as a farmhand. Not as a stranger. But as my husband. My true husband. The words hung in the air, and then Thomas pulled her close, his forehead pressing to hers, his voice a rough vow. Eliza Carrington, you've given me more than I ever deserved. But if you'll have me, I'll spend every day proving I was worth your choice. Her tears fell, but her smile bloomed through them. Then it settled. The first rays of dawn broke across the horizon, gilding the world in gold. The land smelled of gunpowder and earth. But for Eliza and Thomas, it smelled of something new. Hope. Weeks later, the scars of that night remained in the yard, bullet holes in the posts, a patch of blood in the dirt. But the scars in their hearts slowly began to heal. Thomas rebuilt the fences. Eliza replanted the garden. And together, they rebuilt each other. The house that had once been silent now sang with life. With laughter. With warmth. With love that had been hard-won and sealed in fire. And when Eliza Carrington lay her head on Thomas's chest at night, hearing the steady beat of his heart, she no longer felt like a widow clinging to memories. She felt like a wife, a beloved, a woman who had risked everything and found everything in return. Their love was not born of riches. It was not neat or easy. It was forged in hardship, tested by shadows, and sealed with blood. But it was theirs, and it was true. For when a mail-order husband arrived in rags, the widow saw not what he was, but what he could be. And in choosing him, she found not just a man. She found forever. Thomas redeems his past. Eliza chooses him fully, and their love is sealed in fire and promise.